So good afternoon, everybody, whoever's left in here. Just maybe a little detail about myself. My teens were in the 1980s, and who had the teens in that same time maybe remembers one of my favorite movies was the Indiana Jones series. And there was one particular movie which was The Last Crusade, Indiana Jones and the Last Crusade, with Harrison Ford trying to find the Holy Grail, supported by Sean Connery. And if you have ever thought about and played that mind game, how would the Holy Grail for automotive imaging systems look like? How would the system look like where you have this one compute system, where you have the one algorithms, where you have the one camera, the one sensor, and the one lens that would do it all? So this is a little bit something I want to touch on today. And we speak about that with our customers day in, day out. Our headquarters is in California, in Southern California, and we're always asked to build an ideal system. And for a lot of our customers across the globe, across various industries, we find very, very good solutions that we then manufacture in our sites in China. But if you think about the ideal system, again, one system that could do it all, whether it's driving, whether it's parking assistance, whether it's infotainment inside the car, outside the car, you see those buzzwords here on the right side, which is kind of a combination of the words I put in the agenda as a descriptive text for my talk. An ideal system would have to hit on all of those, right? And you know from your own experience how difficult it is to even just balance some of those. Cost versus performance, maybe different materials, image quality, system level quality, so it's very, very difficult. I also have to disappoint you in the first 2 or 3 minutes because I can't show you on slide 15 or 16 of my talk the ideal system. We haven't found it yet. But if you stay and if other people come in and you listen, what I want to do today in the next 20 plus minutes is share with you some of the insights that we gained, observations that we made in our customer interactions, and maybe the opportunities we see arising from those and how they will help us, maybe all of us together, to get a little bit closer to this Holy Grail. So first, let me take you back about 2 years. I think pretty much in the same spot, pretty much at the same date and time, a colleague of mine was talking about the trends in automotive imaging systems that we were seeing at that time. That was 2017. Corey was comparing changes that we have seen, maybe in terms of requirements on the camera level, compared and how do they translate to requirements on the lens level. The push maybe for a higher MTF and better other performance specs, and maybe what are the cost of those. 2 trends that Corey identified were speaking to the fact at that time that everybody wanted to have higher performance, especially for forward-looking ADAS systems, and for more established technologies, maybe backup cameras, maybe surround view applications, there started to come a cost pressure into the equation. And he was speaking to those 2, and I can just encourage everybody to maybe look this talk up on the AutoSens website or on YouTube. It's a very, very informative talk. So what Corey was addressing is trying to find an optimum in this 2D space. How do I balance performance versus cost, and how do, for any given program or RFQ or RFI, where's the optimum for this particular application? But what I mentioned, Corey was also addressing that if you want to push MTF, if you want to push chromatic aberration, if you want to push RI, that comes with a certain cost. Maybe you have to put in more glass to achieve those, which means you have to take into account that your lens or your overall camera system maybe becomes a little bit bigger. So even though he was talking about 2 challenges, in the end, it's multiple challenges, right? And we just put the third vector out here and called it risk factors. Maybe the risk for you is, can we achieve a certain size? Can we set up a new supply chain? Can we achieve certain specs? Or is there maybe a risk attached to moving to a different structure, a different material when we talk about the lens itself? So what Corey was describing is not finding an ideal solution in a 2D space. It was actually finding a solution somewhere in this at least 3D space. And if you fast forward to today, what actually happened, this space just got bigger. And it's not that we just have more solutions somewhere in this cube. Basically, everybody tries to go into this one corner. And if I take the example of TTL, basically everybody strives to get a higher performing system at lower cost and smaller size. So it just becomes just so much more complex and challenging. So how do we take on this challenge? Typically, we have 2 choices. And you see this here, it's either off the shelf or it's a custom solution. All the discussions that we have with our clients, I'm pretty sure it's about 99.9% of our discussion starters, do you have an off-the-shelf lens for X, Y, Z? And obviously the question is triggered by the perceived advantages of maybe some cost savings initially, obviously some savings on lead time, and definitely maybe some risk avoidance, in the hope that someone already built something previously that would exactly match what I want to do today. Most of those programs end up being somewhat customized, or it ends up to being a complete new customized lens with all the things that we know that brings it with it, right? So suddenly I have a high upfront cost in NRE maybe. I have to deal with longer lead times. I maybe have to deal with some risk because simply in the end, two partners try to build something that no one else has ever built before. There is some risk attached to that. But the idea is also then to get a perfect solution. But what I think and what I want to lead you to today is we maybe have to bridge those two. We don't just have to make a decision off the shelf or custom. Where's the optimum? Where's the best of both worlds? So if you ask yourself the question, if you have to optimize on image quality, if you have to optimize on overall system performance, but at the same time have to answer to slower lead times, faster innovation cycles, and maybe cost optimization, how do you actually deal with that? And we believe that taking a platform approach to the overall system, and especially also to optics, what we are responsible for, might be a good solution. And this is also not built on several PhD theses and secret meetings. It's more like hindsight 2020. We actually looked at all the interactions that we have and suddenly figured out there's some common things in there, and we said maybe we call it a platform and approach it this way. So what I want to do is quickly give you 3 examples how we actually arrived at this point. And after that, I'll give you like one more slide per example so you actually see some of the results that were coming out of it. So one of the triggers was some years ago, one of our customers approached us and said, we want to kind of do a one-time R&D investment, but we want to get something out of it for the years to come. And we were sitting down with that particular client and developed a set of lenses that were tailor-made for the sensors that they already picked, so that down the road they basically had kind of a mix and match system for the applications that they envisioned their clients would actually approach them about in future. The other example is coming from our engagement with our partners with the automotive ecosystem, right? We all see trends coming and going, and some of those trends are hypes, but some of those trends are really maybe meant to change some trajectory in the industry. If we see some of those, and we even get the confirmation from our channel, from our partners that we're probably on the right track there, what we did in those cases, we started designing something, even though no one has really asked us for this yet, so that new technologies could be supported by new lens designs. And with that, we created something what we call a lens family, where you have a common set of core requirements and specifications, but then enough flexibility, again, to use those family members for different applications. And then the third example is simply our own observation. If we look at the market, it's still in the news every day, right? Cameras are expected to grow the number of cameras in a car. Every car by now is going to have cameras in there. So it's just obvious that at one point, we're not having a one-size-fits-all. People will talk about a good, better, best approach and solution to those similar applications. So we basically take this and then use our engineering know-how, our design know-how, our process capabilities to offer for one particular application different implementation pathways so that we can offer you and then your customers a good, better, best approach. So as I mentioned, for all of those examples, for the first one, you see here a set of lenses that was a result on sitting down with the customer, being open about the future, not just basically kind of guiding our sources and ideas, but really being open about the technologies we're working on, the customer being open on their envision of their roadmaps, and then saying what would be a minimum set of lenses that would actually deliver on those. And you see on the left side of that table some core requirement that were given by the customer. In this case, a maximum size for all of those lenses in terms of TTL. The construction was given, which was driven by the industry. Minimum resolution was given, and maybe something like the F number. And then based on the sensors that were already pre-selected, you kind of see the products we actually built for this customer. And that was very, very successful. They had kind of a one-time investment, and then they could appreciate that investment over years to come by having a mix and match approach to all of the different applications that they and their customers were going after. The second example, and you remember that was where we're engaging with the ecosystem, all the people that come together to drive new technology and new innovation in this space. And you all know that the 4K, the 8 megapixel sensors, obviously, a couple of years ago, were some of those maybe game-changing technologies. So we created a lens family that, from a requirements perspective, and you see again this here on the left side, construction, resolution, pixel size that is supported, all of this, and with that the resulting MTF and RI, those were kind of the standard across and the same across of those lens family. But then again, every lens in itself, every member of this family maybe offers a different field of view to allow one sensor in that case to be used across different application areas. And the idea is just simply, one example could be to shorten the lead time to first proof of concept. You might already have in-house a lens that maybe delivers on 60 degrees field of view, but you can maybe already do first test on image quality, knowing that the other family member will have roughly or very similar specs, and then you can move forward to maybe swap that lens out to one that has 90 degrees or 120 degrees. So that was the idea behind the lens family. And for the third example, I want to introduce one intermediate slide, because this is not so much based on requirements that we receive from a customer, but rather looking again at the market, looking at our own design experience, capabilities, our material know-how, our process capabilities. And we looked at it, if you take this from the beginning again, performance versus cost, there's kind of a perception that if you start off with plastic and you go along the chain through hybrids, for us means a combination of glass and spherical plastic elements, complex glass all the way to molded glass elements, you think obviously it becomes more expensive, and with that you align it must be higher performing. And what we actually notice, again, in a lot of discussion, that's not true. It's not one curve. It's actually more like a surface area. And again, depending on what you want to try to achieve, you maybe get to this point that it can't be achieved with one or the other structure. Maybe hybrid is the right way to go. And price and performance is basically a combination of those things that you want to achieve. And taking this approach and, again, looking at the market and trying to anticipate what the market is probably requiring moving forward, we took here a set of lenses, and if you take this as one example for one application area, this might be forward vision ADAS optics. So you have a type of similar lens in terms of focal length or field of view. Obviously, you have similar requirements for ghost, for stray light, for F numbers, filter, all those kind of things. But then every lens in itself allows you or your clients to differentiate maybe in terms of cost optimization. Do I go for an all-glass lens? Do I maybe consider a hybrid lens? Different distortion profiles, but ideally all based on the same sensor. So we would never like to force you to switch out the entire system only because you want to go after a new market segment, or potentially consider for an application that you already have something like a drop-in replacement to reduce cost together with your clients. So this was the idea behind offering a good, better, best strategy. So if you bring this all together, right, how do we now define an optics level platform for automotive imaging? So what they have in common, they should share a common set of requirements that are simply mandatory for that particular type of application or industry. They should be purposefully designed for what I mentioned before, maybe a technology that is going to dominate this particular application area or industry in the future. They should be flexible enough that they allow for different applications, different vertical integration, and then, right, if this on top of it also offers a good, better, best strategy so that you, with your know-how, with your own platform, can go into different market segments, the better it is. And this is kind of what we summarize as this automotive imaging optics level platform. A couple of things that are maybe more from a collaborative perspective, less from a technical perspective, that also validate this approach. We quite often see and can connect dots that you maybe don't do in your own companies because complete different divisions and groups are working on this. For us, when the camera started turning inside the car and people started looking for wide field of view, maybe occupant monitoring systems, we said that looks pretty much like a surround view camera. Why don't you start off with that one before we do something very, very specific for you? So again, similar maybe for a more narrow ADAS forward-looking application and an e-mirror application with 60 degrees. So a lot of those things, when they reach us, look very similar. And we think there's some potential for optimization if we would have sit down earlier and said, what are the different things you actually want to do in the next couple of years? And if someone would tell me we want to do surround view and occupant monitoring, I said, let's see if we could find a single lens that could deliver on both of those vectors. The other 2 points we have also seen, again, it's all speaking to the fact if not the right people are in the room from the beginning, or at least at an early point in those definitions, then you might design something and you're very excited about something that when it reaches our table, we just simply have to say, excuse me, physics is not allowing that, right? And some valuable time and resources that were maybe spent over several months to set requirements are simply then not fulfillable. Or the other one, the last one, which we see quite often as well, is certain components are seen as more important, as seen as mandatory, and get locked in very, very early on without any chance to move them anymore. And then again, it reaches our table, and we said it's all great. We even have a lens that it fulfills all of your optical requirements, but unfortunately, this lens was designed for a different sensor size. And then again, we said if we would have sit down earlier, we could have actually explored those options and see what is actually possible. Again, the idea is always to minimize the lead time into an optimized system. So how do we get this collaboration started? How do we actually share all this information, right? If you look at our industry, I think it's fair to say that history showed it's more kind of a sequential approach, right? People try to guard their contacts. People try to guard their trade secrets. People try to only share as much information as is necessary. And this was probably enough when we were all in the beginning with this, but reality today, and I guess you know that, you see that here at those conferences, everybody's talking to everyone anyways, right? So that's not a secret anymore. The only thing what we're not doing is synchronizing that. It's not orchestrated towards a common goal. Everybody talks to everyone about different topics at different point in time. And we're still in this treadmill of suddenly I get an RFQ and I need to write a proposal in 2 weeks and everybody tries to scramble together to get the ideal solution. So if we could move the collaboration model of all of us to something that is more inclusive, and maybe you put the tier one at the center because they do hold a lot of valuable information and connections, but let bring everybody into one room and really sometimes come up with crazy ideas. Not in those 2 weeks between I received an RFQ and I have to submit a proposal. But what if you would lock, and I talked to Patrick about this before, what happened if you would lock 5 very, very bright people into a nice resort somewhere in Switzerland and let them come up with crazy ideas over the weekend? Just defining boundaries where those technologies could go in the next couple of years. And take that information, that input back to all of your individual companies to help guide your corporation to do the right things and not digging yourself down a rabbit hole about something that is, again, in the end, then not possible. After this collaboration phase happened, we might roll back into one of the more traditional models to execute, but I think it's time to do more collaboration. So if we bring those things together and to also start wrapping it up a little, so if we start collaborating more, not with like locking the competition out or trying to manipulate things, but just very high level define new requirements that we maybe all have to align to in future. If we pair that with sharing of roadmaps and sharing of technologies that individual companies are working on, I think then we actually have a system created that would really, again, not in those 2 weeks when we're all under time pressure, but for the future allow us to come up with complete new product ideas or really truly innovate. And how this could look like in the end, right? Maybe with a couple of companies and partners, we fill out something like a matrix like this, where we have on the y-axis the good, better, best approach to address different market segments. And then on the vertical, we have all those different applications, again, from driving over parking and infotainment. And I haven't really counted it, but it's kind of 15 or 16 applications. Just assume a scenario where some partner said, these are the applications we want to go after. And the goal would be not to build 16 individual systems to deliver this, but the goal would be to define a minimum platform where certain components share common parameters and requirements, but have enough flexibility that maybe those 15, 16 application areas, you could actually deliver, say, with maybe 5 or 6 or 7 subsystems that are flexible enough to tackle this. And to bring it back to the beginning, right? So far, we always deal with off-the-shelf versus complete custom design. If you think about this first program, is whatever RFQ is coming our way, we have to make a decision, custom design versus off-the-shelf. And you see here, I used a couple of bar graphs. Obviously, a custom design is perceived to have the higher cost, the longer lead times, some risk, higher risk attached to it. But again, there's an understanding I would get a perfect solution for what I'm looking for. The off-the-shelf system has some advantages in terms of risk mitigation, cost, lead times. And again, there's some hope. Maybe if I reach 80 or 90%, it might be good enough. The thing is, if we stay in this mindset, it will just repeat itself. There's no difference for the next program. Maybe the next program you will suddenly see, to an example that I gave before, that requirements are so strict that even a custom lens couldn't deliver on all of them. And you might also have scenarios where there's simply no off-the-shelf solution. So if we stay in this mindset, some of this will just repeat itself and we're not changing at all. If you compare this now with a platform approach, and from my own personal experience in industry, typically a platform approach eventually always dominates. You maybe have a high upfront cost because instead of one lens, you maybe develop 5 or 6. You have similar lead times because it just takes time to build a new lens, right? To build a complete new camera system. You also have risk involved. In the beginning, again, you build something new. This time you're not only building something new of one, but you maybe build something 4 or 5 new things. But then down the road, if you multiply that out over several programs, you will suddenly see that you have a very high return on investment on your initial cost, and maybe additional cost to maybe customize little things, a filter or something, is very, very small. And the risk is very little because by then you know the platform, you know what the platform can deliver on. And one of the biggest benefits is you have a very, very good chance that the performance always matches your requirements to 100%. And this is not because we have the magic glass ball and we can really anticipate what the future will bring, but in my opinion, custom design and off-the-shelf design are always reactive designs. If you bring the right people together and you define a platform, your platform will inform future requirements because people look at what we already know, what's possible. Again, platform needs to be flexible enough, but you move from a reactive system where you just try to come together to deliver on something and you have to balance performance and cost and other risk factors to something where you build on the platform and the technologies that you know, and then obviously over time you will improve and iterate over the platform. But this is a couple of thoughts that I wanted to share with you. Right, again, it's a holy grail. We're probably not there. We believe that a platform approach and changing how we work together and bringing bright minds together early enough will allow us to get at least a little bit closer and follow in the footsteps of Sean Connery and Harrison Ford. And if you think similar, we're outside there. We have a booth here. We're here today and tomorrow. And we would just happily engage with you around those topics and see how we can build platforms together. Thank you very much.